All right, 7th and 8th graders. So what we're going to do today is assemble what's called our theory notebook. Okay, so in your binder slot, you're going to see some staff paper. Okay, it's got some hole punches in it, and then either a blue or a green folder. The green folder is going to be for 8th graders. The blue folder will be for 7th graders. The first thing I want you to do is to make sure you have a really sharp pencil. So if you have a mechanical pencil especially, okay, just make sure you have like a very, very sharp point. If you're using a wooden pencil, okay, make sure that it's sharpened before we go so that you're able to write your music really, really successfully. Another thing you're going to need is headphones, because you're going to be listening at a different point in time in the video than some of the people next to you, and you want to make sure we stay on track together. Once you have all of those things, and you can pause the video whenever you need to, okay? Once you have all those things, you're going to go ahead and write your name on the name tag, okay, on the front of your folder. Write your first and last name, so just in case we lose this or misplace it, we can return it back to you, because this is going to be a year-long project that we have this year for band, and it's going to be a lot of work, especially. Next thing we're going to do is actually assemble our theory folder. So regardless of what color your folder is, okay, you're going to open it up, and then you're going to see the prongs, okay? So push the prongs up like that. Okay, if they're inside of this part, okay, you can simply take them out. So if it looks like that when you're taking it apart, just pull it out like that. But make sure they're pointing straight up. Bend both of them so they're pointing straight up. Okay, and then your staff paper, okay, right here, you're just gonna place the hole punches right along those prongs. And then this flap is going to fold over on top of the prongs as well. Okay, and then you're gonna fold one up, one down for each of these prongs. And we'll probably add some staff paper to this as the year goes on, but for now we're just going to start with those 3 pieces of paper that you had. They're double-sided, 3 pieces of paper that you had in your binder slot, okay? So once you have that, it's going to be really, really easy to kind of keep track of what we're doing and where we are in the folder. So pretty much what you're going to do is you're going to kind of copy down what I'm doing into your own folder, right? So I'm going to show you all these steps for how to write music clearly, some different symbols that we might use, some different clefs that you may not be used to. So we're going to kind of walk through that together. The first thing we're going to do is just kind of review our treble clef. So what I want you to do is we're going to draw a few treble clefs, okay? First thing you're going to do, okay, on your top line is just draw a line that starts above the top line of the staff. It goes a little bit below the bottom line of the staff. Okay, and then you're going to just start a swirl. So you're going to go to the right first, swirl around to the left, and then kind of loop around like that. So let's try to draw a few of those in a row. You can pause the video at any time if you need to catch up. So line, swirl around to the right, to the left, and back around. Okay, one of the biggest parts of the treble clef is you want to make sure that it loops around with that second line right here in the center, okay? So we know this is treble clef. Let's go and label it treble clef. And if you remember, it's also called the G clef. So let's label that just so we have that. And then just draw one more, so you have 3 total. Be really picky about the way that it kind of swings around. So you definitely see that it's swirling around that G, which is the second line of the staff. Okay, so let's go ahead and label that note G. So draw a circle on the second line. Okay, and we'll just draw it as a quarter note. Okay, so the stem, okay, is always going to go on the right side. The note head is to the left a little bit. Make sure it's exactly, you can tell exactly that it's on that line. And that's one of the reasons we want to have a really sharp pencil point too, so we can precisely write whether it's on a line or a space. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just draw some whole notes, and we're going to draw the whole notes. Oh, sorry. Let's label that note as a G, just so we have that as a reference point. So that note right there is a G. Whenever we're labeling notes, we want to use capital letters, just so that we can see clearly whether it's a C or a G or anything that might look similar in lowercase. Okay. Next, we're going to draw some whole notes. So you're going to draw a whole note on each line of the staff, starting from the bottom and going up. Make sure that you can see the line clearly in the middle of each whole note so we can tell which note it is. If it looks like your whole note's a little bit too big, right, where it's kind of taking up a line and a space, I can't really tell what note that is, right? So we don't want to do that kind of thing. We want to make sure we draw them very, very clearly, either on the line or on the space. That was a terrible erasing job. Okay, next, so in treble clef, when we read these pitches, okay, we already know this one is a G, right here, because it's the same as that one right there. Even if it's a different rhythm, that's always going to be a G in treble clef. And that tells us right there. If we memorize that's G and we're reading in treble clef, then we're good to go. Some easy ways you can tell, and if you probably remember this from an earlier year, okay, for the lines and the spaces, we have a few sayings that we can use. So usually some sayings that are common are every good boy deserves fudge. You could say Elvis's guitar broke down Friday. Every good bird does fly. Every good burger deserves fries. Whatever you want to use is perfectly fine. But go ahead and choose one of those. Okay, and you're just going to go ahead and write the saying there to help you remember it. So I'm going to do every good burger deserves fries. You can do whichever one you want, whichever one you think you're going to remember the most. This is a key to just memorizing it. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, just make sure you have your saying labeled for those 5 notes and try to line it up so your E, your G, your B, your D, and your F line up with the notes. Next, just draw a bar line and kind of separate that from what we're about to do next. Now we're going to go ahead and draw in the spaces. So same thing, make sure you're really precise about how you're drawing them in. Okay, first one in between the first 2 lines, in between the second and third line. And we try to make these kind of like an oval, maybe a little bit of a circle, but almost a sideways oval is truly what it looks like in music. Okay, so these notes are going to be labeled really simply. We can kind of memorize the saying, the word face. So it rhymes with space. It's an easy way to remember that. Hopefully you remember that from 6th grade. If not, memorize it now. So face, okay, that's going to help us keep track of the lines and spaces. So far we only know how to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 notes in the staff. A lot of times our music is going to go below the staff and above the staff, but we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. A good reference point, okay, just so we can kind of keep track, and especially as we're going higher and lower, is just go ahead and label your musical alphabet maybe at the top of your page. So you can use that as a reference. And remember when we get to G, we start right back over again at A. So go ahead and copy that down like you see it somewhere at the top of your page. So that's the basics for treble clef. Now we're going to start on bass clef. So let's draw a few bass clefs. One of the first things you're going to do for bass clef, okay, is you're going to draw a little dot, not really a note, but a dot that's a little bit smaller than a note on the 4th line up. Okay, then you're going to kind of circle around and make almost like a sideways C. So it looks like that. And then one more step is you're going to draw a colon or the dot above and below that same line that we were talking about earlier, so the 4th line. So this one really, really highlights the 4th line of the staff. This one right here, the treble clef, is going to highlight the 2nd line of the staff, which we know is G. So let's draw another bass clef or 2. So do the same thing, so go ahead and draw that small dot first, loop around, and then the 2 dots again, and one more. We'll do a 3rd one here. This is one of those things where the more you do it, the easier it gets. It's a little bit tricky to draw at first, but the more you do it, the easier it gets, right? So we know this is treble clef or G clef. This one we're going to label as bass clef, also known as the F clef. So this clef highlights the G. This clef is going to highlight the note F. Okay? Since this is higher than the middle of the staff, so the middle of the staff would be the 3rd line. This is above that. The stem is going to go down, and the stem is going to be on the left side of the note. Okay, so go ahead and label that as the note F. Next, we'll kind of do the same thing. So we'll draw some whole notes like we did for the treble clef, okay, on the lines and the spaces. So let's do the lines first. So you're going to have 5 of those, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. If it doesn't look clear, okay, like that one I didn't do a very good job, so I'm going to try to do that again so we can see very, very clearly that it's definitely on a line instead of a space. All right? So once you get your 5 notes labeled as such, we're going to go ahead and label them. So we already know this one's F, same as that one. So F and F right there. So that's one that we definitely want to memorize. Even if you usually don't read music in bass clef, okay, we do want to be familiar with both of these so we can read really any music that you're going to see. This is going to help us a lot. Memorize that one is F. Okay. Those of you that read bass clef may be really familiar with the notes, but for those of you that are not, okay, the lowest line is going to be G, and then we have a B, then we have a D, we have the F already, and then the top line is going to be in A. So if you notice, we're kind of skipping some letters. We go from G, skip A to B, skip C to D, because there's some notes in between that we're going to label in a second. Draw a bar line just so we can separate that from the spaces, which are going to come next. One easy phrase to remember, okay, for bass clef lines is grizzly bears don't fly airplanes. Okay, so if you want to write that, kind of like we did for the treble clef, that's a good one. Some other ones, good boys do fine always. Okay, there's some other ones as well, but let's stick with the grizzly bears don't fly airplanes. So go ahead and label that grizzly bears don't fly airplanes. So these are some good devices for just remembering what the lines and spaces are. Pause the video if you need to. Next, we're going to go ahead and label the spaces right here. So just like we did above with the FACE for treble clef, we're going to go ahead and label our spaces for bass clef. And draw a bar line when you're finished with that. So make sure it's very clear that you can definitely tell it's on a space and not on a line. So these we're going to label. The first one is A. Next one is C. Next one is E. Remember, we're labeling with capital letters so we can tell which letter it definitely is. And the last one is G. Now, we were kind of lucky in treble clef. It just spells the word face. Okay, right here, we can use another saying. So one of them is all cows eat. Oh, I just spelled that wrong. Eat, E-A-T, not E-E-A-T. I don't know what that is. And then grass. Another one, if you don't like that one, you can say all cars eat gas is another one. Okay? And if you think of your own phrase that's really going to help you, I mean, the biggest idea is you just want to help this, use something that's going to help you memorize it. All right? So bass clef, F clef, these do not line up. These are not the same note. So the bottom line bass clef is G, bottom line treble clef is E. That's why we have two different clefs, because we have to read music different ways sometimes. So now we talked about how some of the notes are going to go above, some notes are going to go below the staff. So what we're going to do is we're going to label some of those, right? So on your third line of music, your third staff on the paper, okay, let's go ahead and begin labeling some ledger lines, okay? So draw a treble clef, just like you did earlier. Right, and next, okay, we're going to go ahead and label the bottom line. We'll draw whole notes here. Okay, so just draw a whole note on the bottom line. Okay, and we know that note is E from earlier for every, right, in treble clef, E. Okay, now we're going to label the notes going down below that one. So let's draw them first. So right below the bottom line, then we have to add a ledger line. So you're going to draw the line like that. It's kind of like an extra line of the staff that you're adding on, and draw a whole note there. And then we're going to go below that one, so draw another ledger line, and below. Now let's do one more. So now you're going to draw two ledger lines, and on the line. When I go up, if my notes are going higher, I'm always going to go forward in the alphabet. If my notes are going lower, like they are here, I'm starting on E and I'm going lower, I'm going to go backwards in the alphabet. So before E, and this is why this reference is really easy to use, right before E is D, and then C below that, and then we keep going. Easy. Let's go ahead and label that as a ledger line. So draw an arrow to one of those ledger lines, and we're going to label it as such. Okay, draw a bar line. Now we're going to go ahead and draw on the top line of the staff. Okay, and from earlier we know that note is F. And now we're going to go above it. So we're going to do kind of the same way that we did for below the staff. Okay, but you're going to label right above that line, draw a ledger line, add the note on top of that. We're going to do another ledger line on top of that, right on top of that ledger line, and then two ledger lines, and label that note. Next, we know that I just went backwards to get lower. Now we're going to go forwards if we're going higher. So F, and then forward in the alphabet, G, A, B, C. And you could go higher and higher and higher, okay, to get to some of the top notes on each instrument. Okay, it goes much higher than that. It gets a little tricky to read at a certain point when you're adding all these ledger lines in, but a lot of times you'll kind of count up to it, and you'll get used to seeing those a little bit more frequently. Let's do the same thing for bass clef now. So draw your bass clef again. Remember, you can pause this video at any time. If I'm going too quick and you need to catch up, just pause it so you have time to catch up where I left off. Bass clef, we're going to do the same thing we did here, so let's go ahead and draw those notes in. So bottom line, right below the bottom line, add a ledger line, another ledger line below that, two ledger lines. Now in bass clef, we know that that bottom line, okay, is G. And then these are going down, so we're going backwards in the alphabet. Okay, we'll do the same thing with the notes on the top of the bass clef staff. So top line, above that, ledger line, on top of the ledger line, two ledger lines, and then add a bar line. Top note of the staff we know from earlier, okay, is an A, and this is easy. We're just going forward in the alphabet. Use capital letters. Now, if you're confused about any of that, what I want you to do is maybe draw a question off to the side. Why is the top line A in bass clef? If you're confused about something, maybe that's your question, or you have a question about anything we did so far, just write it off to the side and I'll try to answer it as I'm looking through these. Now, basically all the notes you're going to see in middle school band is pretty much going to be in this range. Tubas will go a little bit farther below this one, okay? But most of the instruments won't go much higher than this. Flutes will go a little bit higher than the C we have written here, or sometimes a lot higher than that. Okay? But for the most part, if you kind of kept up with all we're doing right now, those are all the notes you'll ever have to play in middle school band. But sometimes we add some things to it. So treble clef, next line. And let's go ahead and label a few notes together. So the first one, okay, we're just gonna draw 4 in a row, but I want you to leave some space in between each of these whole notes. So we're labeling G's in treble clef. So we're gonna draw 4 of those and then a bar line. A lot of times you're gonna see 4 different looks for the notes. So you might see a regular G. Sometimes you might see a G flat. Okay, when you draw a flat sign, it goes on the line, or if it's on a space, it goes on the space, but we label it G flat. We read it flat G, but you write it G flat. When you're reading music, we look from left to right. The first thing you're going to see is the flat telling you the next note is flat. But when we say the letter of the note, say G flat, like that. Next one we're going to label is going to be a natural symbol. So it's kind of like you draw an L and then a 7. Okay, and we can call that G natural. And then the last one is the sharp. Looks like a hashtag. G sharp. So flat, natural, sharp. Okay, and then bar line. One really important rule, okay, and this is something that middle schoolers miss all of the time. If you learn this, you're gonna be in really good shape. If you memorize this and kind of keep it in mind, even professionals have to remind themselves about this sometimes, right? So let's draw 4 notes. I want you to copy down exactly like you see me draw right here. So I'm gonna draw quarter notes right here, right here. Notice that the line's gonna go a little farther up since this one's higher. I'm gonna draw a quarter note here. And then I'm gonna draw one more right here, which is the same as the first one in that measure. And then a bar line. If I label this as a flat, this one is still flat. So we're gonna write that down. So memorize, if it's within a measure, flat at the beginning, flat all the way through the measure. Remember, this is the measure. And this is the bar line. Okay. The rule is, write this off to the side, accidentals carry to the end of the measure. And we'll go ahead and label this section as accidentals, so we know that those are the different types of accidentals. The flat, the sharp, and the natural are the types of accidentals that we'll typically add to our music. The same thing applies in bass clef, so even if we were to change this clef, okay, and do the same thing, let's say let's label this middle line. So draw 4 of those in a row. And let's label them the same way. So the first one's just gonna be a regular D. The next one is gonna be a D flat. Next one is a D natural. And last one we'll do is the sharp. Like that, easy. Same thing still applies. If I want to end a piece of music, this is a little bit unrelated to the accidentals, but let's say that's gonna be the last thing I write in the entire piece of music. I'm gonna draw a double bar line. On a double bar line, the second bar line is gonna be darker than the first one. And that's kind of like the end. So draw that in and label it. Now, there's another type of clef which you may not be familiar with unless you're a percussionist, okay? And that clef is called a percussion clef. Percussion clef is really, really easy to draw. Between the second and fourth line, you're just gonna draw 2 lines like that. So it almost makes it look like a rectangle when it's combined with the lines of the staff. So this is called a percussion clef. Percussion clef doesn't have the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G in it. We don't label the lines or spaces. Sometimes they'll label a snare drum on one space or line, a bass drum might be a different one, but overall we don't have to read A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If they're gonna read A, B, C, D, F, G, they're gonna use one of these clefs up here, the treble or the bass clef. Okay. Let's go ahead and on the percussion clef, we're gonna talk about some rhythmic stuff. So let's label a whole note. We're gonna do 2 whole notes. So one whole note's gonna go here, and then a bar line, and then we're gonna label a whole note here. Whole note. Next, easy, we already know this. This is review. I'm gonna draw a whole rest. The whole rest is going to go below, okay, the line. They're drawn in a little box that goes below the 4th line of the staff. Whole rest. Notice I didn't draw a time signature or anything. This is just the basic name for it, no matter what it is. Okay? Faster than that, We're going to draw 2 half notes next. So 1 half note is going to go here. It kind of looks like a whole note, and then you add the stem to it. So we call this the note head. And this is called the stem. And I'm going to draw a half note right here, and this line is upside down. Once I get to that halfway point on the staff, I turn upside down for my note. And these are both half notes, so we'll label them as half notes. Half rest is opposite of a whole rest, so it's above the third line of the staff. And we're going to do, kind of color it in. We're going to have 2 of those. So these are half rests. So label those as well. This is all a lot of review, but learning to write music a lot of times, okay? That's actually how a lot of the famous composers, if you've heard of like Beethoven and Mozart, they went back and a lot of times went back to Bach's pieces and they just copied it by hand, and that's how they learned how he wrote stuff and how to write really clearly. Because they weren't lucky. They had to draw all these lines on their own at that time with a feather quill and ink. That you can imagine how tedious that was. We're lucky to be able to print stuff like this out. Let's keep going from here. So we have our half rests. The next fastest thing without adding any dots is just going to be our quarter notes. So we're going to draw 4 quarter notes. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So kind of like first space, second space, third, and then fourth. Now the stem up, up, down, down. Once I get to that middle line, I kind of flip them around. Quarter notes, let's label those. Pretty much when we finish this theory notebook at the end of the year, it's going to be like something you could sell to people because there's going to be so much information. It's like a massive study guide for anything you could want to do. All right, so quarter notes. And then we're going to label some quarter notes a little bit differently. Now let's just draw a few. We're going to draw 5, but we're going to draw them on the lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, now here, stem up, stem up, stem down, stem down, stem down. This is the point where stems usually turn upside down, okay, when we get to the third line of the staff. Even if it's bass clef or treble clef, percussion clef, one of the other types of clefs, that's usually the point where we turn the stems upside down. I want you to also notice the stem, when you draw the stem up, it's on the right side. When you draw the stem pointing down, it's on the left side. So even if we were to flip this upside down, they're going to look the same. We don't want to draw the stems on the same side of the note head. Okay, let's label another percussion clef, and we're going to kind of finish with 2 more types. I know this can be tedious. But this will be really good. And this is probably going to be the longest day, just so we can get it established. This is going to be the longest day that we spend on our theory notebook out of the year. So 1 more percussion clef. Next fastest thing after quarter notes. Oh, we forgot some quarter rest. Label a quarter rest right here. Just draw 1. So it's just, and I'll draw another one for you. It's just a squiggle back and forth, quarter rests. Okay, right here at the bottom, let's go ahead and label. And if you need to flip over, that's fine. You can flip over to the next page, but we're going to label 8th notes, right? So what I want you to do is we're going to draw some 8th notes going up. So I like to start with the circles first to make it easy. Circle on each line. Like that. And then we're just going to group them in 2s. So these 2 are going to go together. Draw quarter notes first and then just connect them with a line at the top. Right here, these are going to be upside down because remember, we flip upside down a lot of times when we get to the third line. So left side of the note head, connect them together. And we'll do the same thing. Let's draw down a little bit more. These are all going to be on lines right here. And these are going to be upside down. Now this one, we have the choice of either going up or down, because we know that note is definitely gonna go up. Sometimes that one goes down, sometimes that one goes up. So either way is correct. I'm gonna draw them up. You can draw them down if you want. It doesn't matter for those eighth notes. These are not 8 notes, they're eighth notes. Eighth rests are gonna be next. We're just going to draw a few of those, and it kind of looks like that. Almost like a 7 with a dot on it. So eighth rests. All right, 16th notes. So now we're gonna label, we're gonna try to go up starting on the bottom line, just one at a time. Right, so I'm gonna connect these 4 together. 16 notes are usually in groups of 4. Okay, so it's kind of like you're drawing some eighth note. Yep, lights one just went off. Eighth notes plus some quarter notes. There we go. Now we can see what I'm doing. That might help. These are eighth notes right now, okay, because they just have one flag at the top. Okay, we're gonna add 2, and that makes them 16th notes. And then these are gonna go upside down. So we'll do the same thing here to here, and they're gonna be 16th notes, just the same way we did with the ones that were right side up. If you're having trouble seeing if your lines kind of blend in with the lines of the staff, sometimes you can darken them up a little bit to make them really clearly 16th notes. And actually when you print it on a computer, a lot of times those are gonna be darker lines just kind of naturally. They stick out a little bit more. So you can definitely tell they're 16th notes. So let's label those 16th notes. There is such thing as a 16th rest. It's gonna look like an 8th rest plus another flag. So it's like 2 of the top parts. 16th rest. Not difficult, not difficult. Cool. So if you're finished with this page, I'm gonna flip over because I'm kind of finished with this page. Like I said, pause the video if you need to catch up, okay? And then mine are not double-sided. You're probably gonna have one on the back right here, okay? But I'm gonna go ahead and label it here so you can see it clearly through this video, right? The last thing we're gonna draw in is just gonna be some time signatures. So let's label this section as time signatures. And we're gonna label some of the most common ones, right? So 4-4, this is not a fraction. Notice I did not draw a line in the middle, okay? This is not what you're drawing, okay? You're drawing a 4 on top of a 4, and they just naturally happen to fall equally halfway in the staff. 4-4 is the same thing as common time. So if you wanna draw an equal sign, and then we're gonna draw a C, which stands for common time. That's the most common time signature we're gonna see. A lot of times, if you can imagine you had a quill pen and ink that you had to keep dipping it in, this is much easier to draw than the 4-4. Probably is only gonna take 1 pen stroke versus dipping your ink in. Makes it a little bit easier for composers that actually had to write with the quill and pen hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Another really common one we're gonna see is 3-4. Notice it's not a fraction again. 2-4. Okay. And then we'll kind of draw a separation. And then these are some new ones that we're going to learn this year. 2-2. And that is the same thing as cut time. So this is common time without the line through it. And this is cut time. cut time, you have to read the notes a lot differently than you do in 4/4 time. They're gonna fly by a little bit quicker than you think they naturally would. One other common one you're gonna see is 3/2. Now this one's a little weird because the top number is bigger than the bottom number. We're not gonna see that as much over here. Sometimes you might see something like 5/4 or 8/4. Those do exist in music, but 3/2 is very, very common when we're in the 2 on the bottom kind of realm. The last kind of category of these are called compound time signatures. And they're going to involve an 8 on the bottom. So 3/8, 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8. Now, you probably haven't played music in this kind of time signature yet, but it is something we'll take a look at this year. You probably have not played music very much in this time signature yet. If you actually remember though, the alma mater is written in 2/2 or cut time. So we have seen that before. Instead of kind of tapping our toe very, very frequently, we tap it a little bit less often, and that kind of amounts to being the same as cut time. Cool. So that's all we're gonna label for today. Okay, I know that's a lot. We did, wrote some really cool music in there. Okay, it's like I said, it's gonna be a really interesting to see this at the end of the year, the amount of work that we put into it, right? If you need to scroll back, okay, to check anything, that's perfectly fine. What you're gonna do now when you're finished, okay, is you're gonna make sure your name is on the front of the folder, whether it's green or blue. This is gonna go back in your binder slot. You're never gonna take this home. This is always gonna stay at school. Okay, I bought these with my own money for you. Okay, this is gonna stay at school so that we keep it nice and protected. So in your binder slot to keep it there, just safe, I am gonna be taking a look at this stuff, so you need to make sure that you have completed the stuff that you see in this video. Okay, all right, thanks for watching.